What's up, everybody? Here I am on the 9th of December, 2024. And today is the release day for Our Evil Dead, which is book 15 of Adrian's Undead Diary. And really exciting. I was online earlier doing a live in the afternoon. Was on for a little over half an hour, just giving some updates to stuff, and I thought I'd come back on here again later during the evening to let the people who are at work pop in to say hi and have a crack at it and maybe ask some questions. So here I am. I don't want to go over everything that we already went over earlier in the day. Suffice to say that everything's good. Things are going well here. Happy with the writing. I'm really happy with the new book. I already know one person finished it, and they said they really liked it, so that was great news. Looking for more feedback as soon as possible, just because it's been a while since an Adrian's book has come out, and knowing that I still have it is always cool. So the other reason why I wanted to do a couple of lives here back to back is I'm testing out a new streaming platform. You may notice that the appearance of how I'm showing up in the stream is a little bit different. Effects are different. Names and stuff are different, and it might either be smoother or rougher. And I kind of just want to, put it through its paces and give it some tests. I'm currently testing out a new chat interface, which I wasn't using earlier today. And it wasn't showing me all of the people who were talking and commenting on the streams. So this new upgrade is allegedly going to let me see everybody's comments. So hopefully I can see everybody's comments. And I don't really know what I'm doing though, so theoretically, that's what we're seeing. So if anybody has any questions about anything, feel free to ask away. I'm happy to answer any questions. I posted earlier talking about being online tonight, and I was kind of curious to see if anybody had any stories about how reading Adrian or listening to Adrian had been important to them or during a pivotal time in their life, because it's always interesting to hear the stories of how his story paralleled someone's life, or they got something that was really meaningful out of the story when it mattered. I love hearing those stories, and the majority of them are sent to me via private message, and I don't want to share anybody's private story, keep their privacy, but really cool to hear. Writing Adrian, especially the early books, was an intensely personal journey because I was going through a lot, and I was using the story kind of as an outlet for energy that I couldn't find a home for. And it allowed me to process a lot of stuff. And apparently it has allowed a lot of other people to process some stuff. So yeah, if anybody has any of those stories, please, let's hear it. James over on YouTube, love the books. Thanks, James. Started during COVID and like the survival aspect. Good. Yeah, COVID was a fucking thing, huh? Yeah, and it's funny because AUD, when I started writing it, I wanted it to be kind of big on the minutia, where Adrian's day-to-day and his struggle to find basic supplies was like a big part of the story. And, as he becomes more stable and accumulates supplies and kind of shores things up and it becomes repetitive, the story grows in scope, right? So it starts to take on more outside of him and outside of the day-to-day logistics. But writing those day-to-day logistics was really exciting for me, And what's funny now is looking back on it, 12, 14 years later, there are things that I did not think to include at the time that I definitely would go back and, put back in, because some stuff is definitely lootable that I just didn't talk about. Hey, Wendy, I'm glad you found a place to comment. And you are coming from Facebook, which is awesome. So now I'm seeing YouTube and Facebook comments in the same place, which means I set it up correctly, I think. Yay. I'm right, you're wrong, Mom. I'm good at something. Anywho, I do sincerely hope that everyone who has picked up the book today is enjoying it. It was a lot of fun to write, and I got to kind of bring together some threads that have been kind of dangling near each other for a long time. And it's great to have these, huge sections of the story kind of like drifting like icebergs. And that the currents are all kind of, pushing them together. And as the person who has a story in their head, I know where I want those icebergs to go, but exactly how they're going to collide doesn't really flesh itself out until, the moment where, push comes to shove. So this book, like many others, this book is where some of those disparate chunks of storylines start to kind of come together, and things that have been kind of hinted at or sort of kind of danced around start to come into a little bit more focus. So I'm really excited to see how people, react and feel about that stuff. So, yeah, and as I said, we're looking at least one more AUD book, probably just one more AUD book. Might be a little bit longer than usual, which is good and fine, but I don't think I can do two without like stretching it out and adding some fluff and kind of, padding it, which I really don't want to do. I'd rather have it end quicker than get drawn out and be crappy. Adrian was easy to relate to. He's an average guy put into a crazy world. Yeah. I did a podcast interview Friday, which hasn't gone live yet. And during the recording, one of the questions that people asked, the guy asked me was, what makes a character good, or what makes your characters good? And one of the things that people tell me is that my dialogue is like really believable. And I try to write in a way that feels organic, kind of messy, the way people talk. And I think the way Adrian has his like kind of stream of ambient, his like the journal stream of thought kind of process makes him very relatable, because you get to see all of his warts and his scars, and he confesses his sins, and we all have those, right? All of us are messed up in our own little way, and having this person try to be better is relatable. So, and really a big part of the story, you could argue the central part of the story, is the idea that you just need to keep trying to be better, right? And not letting your mistakes stop you from trying to be better, right? Don't lose hope because you've made mistakes, all that stuff. Josh, where did you get your idea on the start of the zombie apocalypse? You felt it was such a fresh take on it. Thank you. When I started writing AUD initially as a story from my buddy Joe, that I was gonna email back to him. I knew I didn't want to just do virus or whatever, because it had been done to death in movies. And this is right when zombie fiction was really kind of starting to be a thing. And, I was on the very early wave. I was one of the first, probably 10 authors putting stuff out. So when I was thinking of like, well, how would this come? How would this originate from? I quickly dismissed the viruses. And then after that, I was looking at cordyceps. This is back in like 2010. And this is also before I had come across The Last of Us. And I looked into it and was like really leaning into that. And then I decided, you know what? I don't want to do scientific stuff because I don't want to have my science picked apart, and I don't want to have that conversation. And as a guy who's always been like an old school sort of D&D horror reader, the idea of doing a supernatural background was, really, really appealing. And, people can't argue the origin of your zombies when you're using magic, or in this case, evil. And because I knew that so much of the story of Adrian was going to revolve around that concept of being better and creating a new world that was better than the one that he had, having that idea that these monsters were, dropped on us to force us to make that change, or be eliminated. It just kind of like all worked. And it also allowed me to do stuff like have the zombies not always behave according to the rules, because when there are greater powers that be that can kind of pull their strings like puppets, I have the ability to kind of mess with what people think is safe and what's not. And obviously, as the story has gone on, that has ramped up dramatically. But then again, so has the success of our heroes. So, hope that answers your question, Josh. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, I remember sitting there one night and thinking, like, God, I really don't want to get into an argument with people about whether or not the virus could work. And back when I was writing online and posting everything online live, it would be, entries would get posted on the day that they were released, right? So, the September 21 entry was posted on September 21. So the date on the entry corresponds to the day people were able to read it. The side fictions, the short stories that are interspersed in, were posted in between on dead days, or there were some nights where like people got, the double load, if you will, where there'd be an entry and then there'd be a side fiction, or vice versa. And the night that the short story Midnight, which shows up in book 3, also titled Midnight, the night that dropped was the night that's the big reveal, right? Where the curtain really gets pulled back and everything kind of gets dumped on the table. That night when I posted that story, my website had a chat room. And I was like, all right, everybody, I'm going to post a story and then I'm going to go sit in the chat room if anyone wants to talk. And at the time I was getting, probably 200-300 people every night reading. And I would post almost everything at about midnight. And even at midnight, I'd get, 50, 60, 70, 80 people. And sometimes way more. Towards the end, it was way more. But I posted midnight and sat in the room, and then very quickly it got inundated because people read it and were like, what the hell? It's not a virus. And it was an enormous risk for me to not do the generic, what everyone was expecting. And I was terrified that I was going to lose all of this momentum that I'd built, but this was the story I wanted to write. And it's panned out, and there are people who still complain about it. And, when I look at readership or listenership, I dip sharply at book 3 and 4 compared to the other books in the series. So like pretty sure that, the origin of my apocalypse pushes some people away. Lindsay, if someone approached you to make a movie series about AUD, would that be something you'd consider? Absolutely. Lindsay, I don't know how many of my other lives or my newsletter or Patreon and stuff that you have had access to the last couple of years, but AUD has been in some level of development in Hollywood for 5 years, I think. It currently has fallen through. Nothing is developed, or nothing is in development right now. But we were summer of 2023, I think it was, right before all of the paperwork pooped and expired. We were there, like we were in the pitch meetings, the final pitch meetings. We were getting the signatures of all the people who were greenlighting a show. And it fell through due to the HBO Warner Brothers Discovery merge. we had a show basically ready to go, and it wound up falling through. And because of the merger, they weren't greenlighting anything for about a 4-month span. And in the time that we said that we can't do it right now, we got that from the people. From that time to the point where they were ready to greenlight stuff, the majority of the people who were attached to the show had to take other jobs. So my showrunner, my producer, my executive producer, they all had to work, and they're now working on other shows and other movies and stuff. That being said, that was not the first time that it was in development. And since that has kind of fallen apart, there have been some serious rights inquiries for primarily movies. No TV yet since then. So would I consider it? Yeah, absolutely. It would be awesome to see it somehow turn into a show or a movie. Wendy, I was excited when I found the books for the whole series was done, and here I was waiting for today. Yeah. Imagine the people who had to wait online. It's funny when I talk to people, I gauge how long they've been with me by how and when they found the story. And, it's the people who are finding it now, who are, listening or reading to it, with the vast majority of the series available for purchase, and you can kind of catch up at your speed. And then there are the people who caught up when it was just 8 books, and then the new series came out, Adrian's March, books 9+. So they got the whole original core story, got to complete that, and then they had to wait for the new stuff. So they got some of it complete, some of it new. And then there's the old school people who were with me back in 2010, before it was in print or audio or on Kindle, and they had to wait night to night to read it. And you didn't know what was happening because it was live, right? So in the entries where, Adrian, the infamous one is when Adrian says, "I'm hurt," and that's pretty much the whole entry. I got so many hate mail messages that entry, because he didn't post again for like 2 days. And all of these people are like messaging me like, "Dude, is he okay? Dude, tell me he's okay. I'm going to be pissed if he's not okay." And I'd just be like, find out in a couple days. Maybe he posts again, maybe he doesn't. So, Noel on the YouTube. Wendy, a couple of years ago, the way he killed you. Sorry. Wish I could do better. It was recommended by Audible a few months ago. Thanks, Audible. I'm hurt bad. Fucking dog. I love dogs, for the record. I love animals. Even though the Jones Road puppy was a bit of a problem, I still love dogs. That's what she said. What's up? How's my Argentina homie? Noel in the YouTube chat right now has been around for a very, very long time, and he's a big help behind the scenes. He's done a lot of work to kind of have my back. So deeply appreciative of this fella. Josh, by the way, Audible has done so much for me. I have some big supporters inside the company, big fans who continue to loop Adrian into sales and promotions and advertising packages and stuff. And the fact that those few people have consistently had my back at Audible and pushed that product out has been huge. So I am always happy to see that new people are getting brought in by Audible. Now, 13 years now, probably, right? You started reading either at the end of the website or shortly thereafter, right? Which would have been 2012. So if that's the case, about 12 years. Pardon my cough. I had some kind of nasty post-nasal drip going on. No runny nose, just coughing. It's pretty awesome, if I say so myself. Round it down, 10. Yeah, numbers larger than 10 are just 10. I'm glad you like the take that I have. If I had to do it again, I would probably do it differently. Just to do it differently. Not that I regret doing it the way it went down. But yeah, it would be fun to play around with a different origin, just because I already did this one, The when I was saying that I wanted to hear if anybody had any interesting stories about how Adrian might have connected with them. One of the themes that I get a lot, which is really heartwarming for me, is people who were in tough spots, listening or watching, and how Adrian's struggle against problems and trouble helped them kind of like stay grounded and stay focused and keep pushing. A lot of military guys dealing with PTSD and survivor guilt, which my background is mental health, especially those subjects, and traumatic brain injury. And I wrote a lot of the story kind of authentic to that. So for the guys who are going through it, I think it resonates really, really strongly with them, and they can kind of connect with it, feel like it's real. I get a lot of messages from those guys. A lot of people who are sick, like in the hospital, and they're listening, and it was able to get them through time. That was really tough, and also people going through like breakups and divorces and stuff like that. So take care, Noah. So those are the stories that when you're hammering out the keyboard and you're just making bullshit up, and just doing the best you can. I never envisioned that someone somewhere was going to read or listen to it at a point where hearing it was really going to matter and really going to hit. My whole mindset when I'm creating these stories is like, oh, this is fun, this will be cool, someone will like this, and then to have this like weight come back at you, and have it like be really real for someone is just like the most amazing feeling. 2014, according to Amazon, was the first book. Adrian can keep going. Adrian is very relatable. I tried to keep him obtainable as a personality. It's tough though, right? Because like he's fictional mostly. Yeah, I have a standing rule, and it hasn't really been used much lately, but I have a standing rule that any deployed unit overseas can message me and request books, and I'll send them a care package, because I have a lot of friends and family who served, and are still serving. And I know how important it is when you're in the middle of nowhere to just be remembered, especially by strangers, in a meaningful way, other than getting like, blank or generic Christmas cards from kids, which is still cute. But I would send, boxes of signed books to units in some pretty hot spots. And the messages I would get from them was just awesome. They're just really thankful and grateful. And that feels really good too. Without looking up all the individual dates, Wendy, I stopped writing the series in March or April of 2012, I think it was. And at the time, when I was still finishing it up, I was under contract with Bain Publishing, to turn the series into, at the time, they wanted a 7-book series. And we were in the process of editing that and getting it all packaged up. And then the Bain deal kind of fell through, for various reasons. And everyone on the website was like, just do something, just put something out. We want to buy it. And this was when self-publishing was really starting to take off. And I got the support of a friend of mine who is a graphic artist, and we just did it, and haven't looked back. So, and since then I've got other book deals with publishers to distribute things and whatnot, because AUD has been such a big success. But the majority of the stuff first started to hit like the mass market right around 2000, probably end of 2012. But that was like the print and the Kindle. Audio didn't come around until probably around 2014, which was when I was like, all right, I'm going to try this. What's this audio thing? And, for me, it was, when I was a kid, it was books on tape, right? You'd go to the library and they'd have these like, foam plastic containers with like 4 cassettes in them. And, you get in your car and you pop a cassette in the player, and old people who couldn't read did books on tape. So I always kind of like thought it was silly, but then, you read the writing on the wall and you see how many people who are, you see all the people who are, consuming books in audio, and now I'm like almost exclusively audio. Like I don't have the time in my life to sit down with a book. I have 2 kids and a house to take care of and a wife, and there's always something to do. And if I don't have an audiobook, I can't read, but we do have audio. So when I want to listen to a book, I can be doing laundry. I can be doing dishes. I can be driving in the car. I can be, working out in the garage, trying to fix something up or whatever. So yeah, audio, now that I'm a big time consumer of it, audio is very clearly the way to go, I feel. Not that, Kindle and print aren't still enormously big, but like I really see the value differently with audio. Books on albums, oh boy, that is pretty old. But when they were chiseling them on tablets, right, in a cuneiform, and people would read them to you in the desert back in the good old days. So if anybody has any feedback about the series, good or bad, I'm absolutely happy to hear it. I know that there have been complaints about various different things along the years, and some of the stuff, is mistakes that I can kind of revisit and fix. Some of it's just choices that, if you don't like it, well, this is what I want to do with the story. Tough break. And some of it is just stuff that's, out of my hands for business reasons or whatnot. But I do like hearing the feedback. It is helpful. So Wendy, Kindle saved your marriage. Yay. Can never get rid of a book. Kindle like every year. Yeah. So yeah, I have so many books. It's like embarrassing. I would call myself a collector, but that would be admitting that I have a problem. Lindsay, you are excited. She'll be here Thursday, and you're very welcome for the forum. I love doing these every once in a while. Used to do them a whole lot more, but with the move this year into the new house, it's been like really hard to find time because in the evenings it's just been I've been exhausted because we're doing work on the house all day long, and I would get to like 8 or 9 o'clock at night and be like, nope, I'm just gonna go lay down and put my feet up. But now we're kind of caught up on the housework, and then we're heading into winter, so there's less less to do. And the kids are going to bed kind of more autonomously or settling faster, so I'm not up with them super, super late. And I now have a decent office space to do this in, so hopefully I can do these a little bit more often. Laura, I broke your heart with some character losses. Yep, I know. I'm sorry. I already know the ones. And, you got to break eggs to make an omelet, and the loss of a character, especially an important one, reminds us that the stakes of the story are real, right? So I didn't want to hurt your feelings on purpose, but I did want to have you have feelings, if that makes sense. Wendy, it's not hoarding. Oh no, I'm not a hoarder. I don't have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about. But how nasty is my office right now? So I just, one of the projects that I've been working on is my bookshelves here. So I'm going to just kind of pan over, and I did all these built-ins. They're not done yet. But when we moved in, that whole wall right there was just blank wall. I got a Murphy bit over there in the corner of my office. So my office turns into the guest room. But this is just like one very, very, very tiny section of all the books that I own. I have at least the same amount of books of wide format large books in the garage in various waterproof totes, and then I probably have 5 or 6 massive totes of books as well that will probably never actually be able to go on a shelf. And I know this, and I know I should put them away or sell them or give them away or whatever, and I just can't. Like one day I'll have a shelf to put those on. Not that I'll ever read it again, but I'm a lifelong collector of things. I was a comic guy for a long time. Still am, but not to the level I was when I was a kid. So the bookshelf I just showed, the doors in the bottom have comic boxes in them, and I still collect a few series. And then actually in front of my desk, I have 2 more comic boxes that are where my feet are right now, that are mostly full, that I need to find a home for that's not in the garage or the basement. Can't store anything in the basement here. But yeah, that's books and comics are an issue. So, and speaking of comics, those of you who haven't checked it out, the Bad Wabbit series is still moving forward that I'm working on the editing for to help. And books 1 and 2 are available. I think book 3 might be available in digital. I think Anthony made it available in digital recently. I'm not sure. I forget what the messages were, but the Kickstarter for book 3 and hopefully book 4 will be up live again in the next month or 2. So if you want to support that series that I worked on, Anthony would really appreciate it. And down the line, as I sort of wrap up some of these side projects, I do want to revisit doing my own comic series. All of the comic book stuff that I've worked on, I have been the creative partner of someone on, and I don't own the rights to the ideas. So it's hard for me to take a project that I've already worked on and say, all right, I'm going to take it and run with it and get it done, because there's somebody else involved, so an owner, somebody who has, skin in the game. And I can't just take it and run with it to make a comic on my own. I've got to, kind of toe the line and respect their need to be involved. But if I do come up with my own idea all on my own, then I can do whatever I want with it. And I have so many ideas, it's not even funny. But eventually it would be nice to get back to doing that. And I can bust out a whole comic script in probably 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe less if I'm really feeling the muse. But I've been debating doing some Adrian's, World of Adrian's kind of comic books, revisiting maybe some parts of the story that were kind of glossed over and having them kind of blown out in full comic detail or something like that. But that would be fun to do. As a comic guy who, collected a lot in the 80s and 90s, having my own comic book would be like, life dream stuff, right? Hallelujah. Like, I did it. Not that I haven't already achieved like a ton of my own life dreams, but like that's one that would be like a huge one to accomplish. Having my name as an editor on Anthony's book was amazing. But yeah. Keep the books. One day we'll have the library with the sliding ladder. Yeah, that would be cool. If anyone wanted to know what a bunch of my house looks like right now, Google dark academia decor. My wife is low-key obsessed with the dark academia look, which is this like lush, lots of dark colors and deep sort of dark woods and stuff like that. And our house is like that. Like we have lots of bookshelves all over the place and eclectic decor. And the house is begging for a library, but not everybody has the space for a library. We certainly don't. If we threw an addition on the back, but that costs money. I'm glad you would read Adrian's comics. I think they would be a lot of fun. And I have enough contacts in the industry now that I think it would be worth it to try. But, we'd see. Ooh, Laura has a question. Originally found the website in 2013. A few years passed. I remember the series around 2020 and read the book version. Yep. I remember the loss of some characters were different than the web version. Are you remembering the character losses correctly? So if you read the web version and then read the print Kindle audio, there are some differences. When we took the web version, it was written with more of a recap theme because of like a TV, like an episodic TV show, they give you the recap at the beginning of what happened in the last episode to kind of refresh your memory. And I wrote it originally with a lot of recaps, because it might be 3-4 days since the last entry. And when I took the web version down and fixed it, I took out probably 90% of those recaps because they're redundant in a book, right? I don't have to recap the chapter you just read every chapter, right? Like I just don't have to do that. If the story jumps or leaps around and I have to recap something that happened in the last book, sure. And then, in addition to pulling out the recaps, there were some scenes that were kind of summarized in the web version, that in retrospect made total sense to add to. Including, there were, I think, 2 whole side fictions that went in, probably 10 or 20,000 extra words, kind of, again, blowing out some sections of the story that weren't explored adequately. But as far as character losses go, none of the deaths from the website were changed when it went to the book. So I'm trying to think if there is any that I'm just not remembering, but I think it was pretty much as is. When Angela and, I'm drawing a blank on her name, the 2 sisters, the McGreevy family, when they arrive at Alpa, at the kind of culmination of the farm storyline, on the web version, I did not write that nearly as robustly as it is in the books, in the audiobooks. So there was a scene when, and I don't want to say names, but there was, I think, at least 1 character, maybe 3, go down during that sort of incident. And on the web version, it wasn't written. It was written more of a, hey, these people died, it was sad, as opposed to actually showing the deaths. And I go into way more detail there. So maybe that's something that feels different. Hello, Andre. But yeah, I think that's about it, Laura. There were, the side fictions that got added in. There was some, strife and whatnot that didn't appear in the web series, but those would have been new characters, or character demises that happened kind of off screen that were brought on screen, because that's just a better way to do it. I hope that answers your question. It's one of the tough things about writing the stuff like this with the journal format, because there's only so much that Adrian can know. And when you're only seeing it through his eyes, and he is an unreliable narrator, right? Like, he doesn't write things the way they actually are. He writes things the way he perceives them, right? So when you're reading this or listening to this, if you only have his perspective, you only get an incorrect or close version of the story, which is why the side fictions and the short stories, where you get to see perspectives of other people, are so important. Then you see, Adrian does a lot of puffing himself up in his journal, right? Because he's like psyching himself up to go do these scary things, right? Because he's just, he's scared. He's a human being. So a lot of times he talks about himself like he's bulletproof, and he's just trying to like pump himself up. But in reality, he's, more cautious and more timid than, he lets on. And at the same time, he talks about all these plans and all this planning, and he's, doing all these things. But then when people see him, he's like more impulsive and instinctual and, just kind of like in the moment. So you get to see that he doesn't record himself as accurately as the world would see him. So that's fun. So, Andrea, you want to say thank you? You are absolutely welcome. I have loved living in this world and still love it, though I'm ready for a break for a little bit. Doing this writing gig as a career has been just really a blessing that I never could have anticipated. Truthfully, never. I always like to write and I always like to tell stories, but I never thought I would ever get to the point where I could do it as a living. And this has been a just insane, just amazingly awesome. Pardon my cough. When I originally wrote the first 8 books, I had a full-time job at the same time. So when you say hard work, the hard work was trying to hold down a full-time job as well as create the story. And I was obsessed with writing this. I wrote every single day. I wrote a ton. I wrote hours upon hours upon hours because it was what I needed at the time. And the story was just pouring out. But I didn't sleep a whole lot. And, I was going through a divorce and I was broke. And I had just moved from this, 3-bedroom condo that I had bought with my ex-wife into a studio apartment in a basement down the street pretty much, and lost my cats and, didn't have a storage unit for anything. And, I had to store things at my friends' houses, and I had nothing else going for me really. So, the hard work was managing all of those things without going crazy, and also using the story as a way to kind of vent all of those feelings that I didn't have a good outlet for. So that was work. Wendy, you read another series. Where's the journal? Yeah, that's a great idea. One series was the journal, and another series was someone reading the journal. Yep, I had considered doing that. And when I was writing the original web series, I had considered when he's talking, if this was ever read by anyone, what would that look like? Is this 20 years later? And at the time I only had a rough idea how it was going to end. So I was never able to really flesh it out. But what's interesting in the story, pardon me on, is that, spoiler alert, plug your ears if you haven't finished it. But we know that the story, his journal, is at one point copied, and it goes into the hands of someone else. And if you're following the story, it kind of gets disseminated, and Adrian has no idea to what level other people have already read it. But that's kind of something that I think is a lot of fun to play around with, right? He's using this to vent, but when people read it, they're going to see this, situation and be like, whoa, this guy had a lot going on. So, and to somebody who hasn't experienced anything of the supernatural in his world, what he writes about makes him sound batshit crazy. Seeing things, hearing things, zombies doing weird stuff, right? If they haven't experienced that, he's going to sound like a Looney Tune. But yeah, the future of my post-apocalyptic writing is still there, even when Adrian's comes to a wrap. I said earlier in the first stream I did today that I am involved in a shared world apocalyptic series that I'm writing one book for, possibly more, but probably just the one. And it's a coronal mass ejection book, solar flares that fry all the electronics and leave humanity back in the Stone Ages kind of thing. There's no zombies. There's no existential threat of evil. But the majority of the story is about people surviving when they lose all the amenities of life and how society kind of crumbles and collapses. And the book I'm writing has the working title of The Hat Trick. And I'm writing one story, which is apocalyptic because it's still going on. Post-apocalyptic is what happens after the end. Adrian's is a post-apocalyptic story, for example. But then after that, I have an idea for another sort of Zompoc series that's not really Zompoc, that's really intriguing to me right now. And I already started outlining it and kind of busting out the details and stuff. And unless something much, much better comes along for an idea, that's going to be a series that I'll write, at least the next new series that I write. I have no idea how many books it'll be. I would say 3, but that doesn't mean anything because once I start writing, I have no control over where it goes. So we'll say 3, and maybe it'll be 7. I don't know. I'm bad at setting boundaries with that stuff. Anywho, if anybody has any questions, feel free to fire them off at me. Happy to answer them. It is always fun to see what rises. Part of my issue is because my brain never really shuts off. I have so many ideas that are like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like that would make for a good XYZ. And they're not always good ideas. They might be interesting and they might be like good enough for a scene or a chapter or a short story or like a side plot, but they're not enough for a book. And knowing when one idea is one thing and one idea is another thing is, part of the skill set that you develop, right? Rather than sitting down and trying to turn every idea into a novel, you gotta figure out how. Laura, which side story is my favorite? Oh, that's a really good question. Boy, what jumps to mind? I don't know. Let's dig into the folder here on the computer. So I've got all of these folders of files. Let's see. Stranger Among Us, Traitor, Bombs Fell, Becca, Cassie, Dream a Little Dream, Dreams of a Dying Man, Exodus, Gasoline, Guilt, Homecoming, Jerusalem, London, McGreevy's Report, Midnight, One Mistake, Paranoia Island, Phil's Story, Providence, Putting a Name to a Face, Soccer Mom, Sweetest Amy, The Chief, The Crucible, The Factory, The Golden Palace, The Great Fire, The Road to Bastion, Siege of Mildenhall, Tyrant, Under the Moroccan Sun, Valentine, White Blood Cell, and Zombie Scissor Fight. So those are the original ones from the first 8 books. And of those, I would say the one that I probably like the most would be, I think The Golden Palace and Gasoline are super fun because they're like comedy. And those really stand out to me because they were a lot of fun to write and kind of be absurd with. I think One Mistake, The Last Stand of Hall B, is like arguably the best horror story of all of them. But as far as like straight favorite, I'm not sure. I'm terrible at picking favorites of anything because I'm like, well, I can give you my top 10 and at any given day it could change. And then as far as the new stuff goes, in Adrian's March, we have A Mother's Love, Bring Me That Horizon by the Rocket's Red Glare, which appears in the book that came out today. Ernest Goes for a Walk, Fetters. I'm not sure that's actually a side fiction. Junkyard Dogs, Just Me, Meow Bitch, Mostly Bad Decisions, that also appears in the new book. Now You See Me, Only Bad Choices, Rachel and Mara, Sabotage, Sanctuary, Shipocalypse, Tactical Septic Tank, Terrible Things in Your Name, The A Game, The Cleaving, and Vulnerable. I really like a lot of these. The stuff that features Chris Fagan, I love because they're funny. So like Tactical Septic Tank is like A+. By the Rocket's Red Glare is another Chris Fagan story, which I really like because, again, it's just like kind of absurd, apocalyptic humor. The Otis story, Meow Bitch, is probably my favorite because that's something that I had been kind of holding off on writing for a really long time. And I wrote it in a way that was really fun. So I think that one's probably one of my favorites. Volume 2 of the Omnibus on Audible. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. The rights issues are a pain in the ass because Audible, there's a couple of layers to this. Audible doesn't like doing 2 omnibuses in a series unless that's the series. And in order for me to do that, according to them, I would have to rebrand the Audible omnibuses entirely into their own series, which would make finding the series order like a real pain in the ass because I couldn't technically call them Adrian's Undead Diary anymore because the Adrian's Undead Diary books are the individual books 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So I would have to pull the data of the first one, rename it to something, and then bundle the second one, probably the next 4 books, and it would just be part 1 and part 2, as opposed to saying that, this omnibus is the first 4 and this omnibus is the second 4. They just want it to be part 1 and part 2. So there's that issue. And then some of the books in the first 8 were originally done with a royalty share contract with James. And the vast majority of them, those contracts have expired and the rights have fully reverted to me, but some of them haven't, or parts of them haven't. So there are some side fictions where he's still contractually linked to them, and I can't change any of those products until those contracts expire. So there's like 7 different things all going on at the same time, and there's no really good way for any of them to be kind of sorted through. And I can't really sort through them at all until those contracts expire. So my hands are tied until that's done. And then once he's set free and no longer linked to the recordings and stuff like that, then I can actually talk to somebody at Audible and say, all right, how can we do this in a way that makes sense, and see if it's an option. So hope that answers your question. Laura, from a writing perspective, you enjoy how I built the world. Thank you. Hall B sticks with you. Yep. Yeah, it's just kind of like sad and tragic and like kind of hopeless, which is a shitty thing to get like jazzed about, but I did a really good job, I think, hitting that note. Besides Adrian, who's my favorite character? 50-50 with the other 2 big ones, Abby and Gilbert. Most of the other characters I have some level of like investment with and I enjoy, but like Gilbert was essentially based on my dad. So when I write Gilbert, it's like me putting the memory of my father into the character, right? And trying to envision him kind of reborn as this character. So like incredibly meaningful for me. And Abby is this like kid, and she's grown up with us. And she went from this like kind of meek, nerdy, quiet sort of wallflower to this like fierce, strong, take no shit hero, and like I have like fatherly pride in that character because I feel like, in a way, I feel like she's a daughter. So I'm glad you like Meow Bitch Wendy, and you're very welcome, Andre. I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability. Very rarely do I not give some level of answer. So the cat better live. Yeah, no, I can't kill Otis. I can't. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't. I would absolutely be stabbed. Full confidence that someone would shank me at a public appearance. There's that documentary, I think it's on Netflix, where it's like, Don't Mess with Cats, I think it is. And it's about this essentially like a snuff film that this weirdo filmed. It's a documentary, and he films himself hurting a cat, and he posts it online. And the internet, sees this asshole hurting a cat, and they proceed to do this like, level 10 investigation to find this fucking guy because he hurt a cat. And they find him, and he goes to jail. Andre, I can't lie, I feel really bad when blah blah died. I'm gonna say it out loud. I felt more betrayed to discover the truth. Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, you hit the exact emotional roller coaster, on the head, Andre, because like his story, Gilbert's story, is so layered and so painful, and it's tough because there's like anger and then relief, and then there's like sorrow, and it's tough. And what I encourage people to do is going back after you've consumed the series and specifically reread everything with Gilbert, knowing how it ends. Because I wrote it from square one, knowing how it was going to end. And when you see all of his conversations and his little, the way he handles all these different situations, and you understand like the weight of what he's dealing with behind those scenes, it's a completely different experience. And like looking back on it, 12 years, 14 years later, I'm like really impressed by myself that I was able to keep my shit together that long and execute it in a way that felt meaningful for people. So good job. Abby, I feel bad for what happened to her family. Yep. You do have to grow up fast. Yeah. Dieter, I made Dieter cry. Not the first person, by the way, not even remotely close. Yeah. Abby was able to, I don't know if fix her problems is the right word, because I don't know how many of her problems are actually fixed, but she did find ways to cope with them, which is what you mean, I think. And she found ways to, move on, or, cap them so they don't continue to flare up and cause issues for her and for those around her. And if you're past book 8, you know that it's not just her, right? Like she has more people in her life. So thank you, Wendy. I kind of wish I had the events with Gilbert take longer to happen, because I think I could have done more with Gilbert pre-confrontation with evil. But it went down great. It hits hard, and people, Gilbert reminded of your grandpa. He enjoyed AUD with me. Oh, I'm so glad he enjoyed with you. Sorry he passed. My father, who Gilbert is based on, was also a World War II vet. My dad was in the Army in the 3rd Infantry Division and fought in Africa and Italy. And obviously, the timeline for when my father was in the military versus when Gilbert would have been in the military is not the same. So Gilbert's, the version of my dad that is Gilbert, fought in the Vietnam War. And if you've read any of the Tales of AUD side fictions, right, there's one that has a huge chunk of Gilbert in it called The Other Side. And, he's telling stories about shit he did in Vietnam. So what's interesting is I have a brother who fought in Vietnam, an older brother, and he was with Mac V. Sog, which is, some of the original Special Forces guys. And I tried to like kind of honor my brother and what he did back then by kind of like tying in what he did in Vietnam with Gilbert, who is essentially like, a proxy for my dad. So I was able to kind of like bring those two things together, which feels really cool. Meaningful for me behind the scenes. Whether or not anybody actually gets it is irrelevant, but it felt really good to do it on my end. So, and Tommy, the SEAL, is based loosely on a cousin of mine who was in the teams for about 10 years. And I didn't get the intensity right. Tommy's not as intense as my cousin. He's just driven, like he's just a different breed of person. But again, that character exists as kind of a nod to him. Oh, you got your grandpa's Colt. It's awesome. 1911s are probably my favorite pistol. I do own one. Because, when in Rome. Just looking at all my messages here. Release days are fun because I get 10,000 messages on 14,000 platforms. One of the single most annoying things about this business that is like eye rolling to me is how hard it is to actually get news to people. It's so hard. Laura, will I be visiting the West Coast eventually? Yes. When I talk about doing like events and traveling and stuff, I did a ton of events before the kids came. I did book tours all the way as far west as Texas. And I've gone back to Texas to do events, as well as stuff between here and there. I've done, gosh, I don't know, Virginia, Louisiana, Tennessee, the tiny one in Arkansas. I've done a bunch in Texas. I did Nashville. I did Cincinnati, and up in this area, I've done stuff in New York and Boston, and everywhere in New England, because New England's small and I can cover the whole thing in a day. But as far as West Coast stuff goes, when the kids were born, they just don't travel, right? Like 3 and a 5-year-old don't travel well. And in terms of doing a signing, either I have to bring the product, right, or have it shipped there. And that requires me to have like either a store to partner with or someone who lives in the area who can warehouse it, and I can just have it shipped there. And then I have to set up a location or be invited or whatever. So there's logistics involved. But primarily the issue is it's hard. It has been hard for me to leave my wife with the kids for, a 4 or 5 day trip on my own. And it hasn't been practical for us to take them cross country. We are now at the point where they can sit in the car for more than 4 hours without it being like a fucking thing. So we will be doing more of it. DMW's here. Hey, Anthony, creator of Bad Wabbit. Laura, California. I would love to do California. I've only been to San Diego. Went to San Diego for Thanksgiving for 3-4 days. But that's about it. Andre, can I ask you a personal question? When you were writing about Cassie, were you writing about your ex-wife? In part, yeah. There were elements of Adrian and Cassie's relationship that were kind of parts of my first marriage. They're very different, but one of the things that is absolutely true from a parallel is the idea that Adrian was in this relationship that he felt happy in, but ultimately wasn't. And he doesn't really start to admit that to himself until pretty far into the story, where he asks himself the question, really, why was I with Cassie? And what did I not go to rescue her because I didn't actually love her, And that was a big part of my kind of realization with my ex-wife, where we were together for 13 years. And I am not sure we were in love with each other for the second half of it. But we had a good relationship. We got along. We cohabitated well. We traveled well. And we had a lot of mutual friends. And we had a lot of fun. But did we really love each other? No, we didn't. So writing about Adrian and Cassie's relationship in that way kind of allowed me to wrap my head around feelings and suspicions and stuff that were going on in my own life. Other parallels were my ex-wife was an accountant, very similar to Cassie, and she worked in the city, like Cassie, and that kind of like situation in the real world made for a compelling fictional story. So, Wendy, I got to come to Jersey. I was in New Jersey last week, actually. We bought a new car and had to go down to Paramus to pick it up. Didn't do a book event, but I was in Jersey. Yes, love to roommate real quick. Open and honest. Like I said, if I can answer it, I do. One of the things, Wendy, one of the things about me as a person is, and I would hope that the people who have met me would agree with this statement, but I'm like pretty transparent, even when it's not good for me. And I spent a large portion of my life kind of bottling up that stuff and realized only much later in life how miserable it was making me, And one of the things that I have always kind of held on to with my writing career is that I want my readers and listeners to support me, right, Chris? Not necessarily one book series or one character that I've written. I want them to become invested in me as a person and my career, regardless of what I write, right? And in order to do that, I need to be me. I need to be genuine. I need to connect. I need to like show that I'm a real person that's in this world and I'm doing the best I can. And I'm messed up and I make mistakes. And, I try to help people as much as I can. And I try to make myself as accessible as much as I can. And answering questions like that, open and honestly, is like, it gives me all of the things in my life that I think I need. I believe I need. I need to be more honest about that stuff. I need to, hold that mirror up to myself. I need to not try to downplay bad things because I think people will think less of me, which is something I did for a very long time. And I hope that transparency and that honesty is the kind of thing where people will be like, oh, he's got a new book, let's pick it up, right? I hope it translates to that down the line. And so far, so good. But yeah, like I want real connection, like it matters to me when people buy my book, right? It matters to me from like a financial standpoint, obviously, but also from like a connection standpoint, right? Like one other person decided to give my reading a try or my writing a try. That's fucking cool, right? So let's celebrate it. David, glad to see me live again. I'm glad to be here live again. I hope to do more. Dieter, me and a handful of other authors you're loyal to. I appreciate that. Answer questions and are open and awesome to have a conversation with, even if the replying takes weeks. Yes, I am awful sometimes with writing back to people. I will acknowledge that. That's a feature of my ADHD, where when I hyperfixate on tasks or jobs or projects or whatever, it's to the exclusion of other things, right? And that's where the ADHD bites me in the ass, because I'm like doing really good work on something and then like my brain is totally locked into it and I'm focused and I'm like churning out good. But then at some point I like lift my head up to catch my breath and I'm like, oh fuck, I haven't done these like 14 things in 2 weeks. Shit. So messages are one of the things that frequently come back to bite me in the ass. DMW, do you ever get backlash from my honesty? Yeah, I do. There have been some times where I've said stuff that has come back on me. I don't regret it because like I took a stance on something, and I said something that felt important to me. And if you don't agree with me on that, then fine, but like I'm going to be me and I'm going to do the things that I believe are right in this world. And you either support me or you don't, but I'm going to be me, right? And if you don't want to support the me that I am, as opposed to the me that you thought I was, then I don't want your fucking support anyway. So we should hold that mirror up. Thank you, Wendy. It's hard. I don't like looking at it a lot, and it's tough to reflect and grow. am still working on your fan fiction. Go Dieter. Go Dieter. Keep at it. It's got to get written, right? It's the number one advice I give people. Write the story. Write the story. Anthony, to further delve into it, the thing that kind of thanks for your support. The thing that I can remember that really blew up was during like the Black Lives Matter stuff, and with the whole white privilege, Floyd kind of death thing. I made a post and I talked about how Black Lives mattered, and there was just a huge slew of people who just didn't understand where I was coming from on it, and I lost fans that day, like a lot. And it's not a black and white conversation. And I mean that literally and figuratively, right? Like, we're not just talking about black people versus white people in that instance. There's so much nuance and so many points to be made and so many things to consider. And I think that the phrase Black Lives Matter is not the most nuanced way to communicate it. But when you say that, that immediately shuts the door with some people. And I, like with all politics, I don't believe it's left versus right. I believe it's not even a line, a spectrum. It's more like a circle where you start going in all these different directions, and we're all just hopefully in the Venn diagram. Because I think we're all in many ways contradictions internally. So it's not as easy as just saying I am this, right? Because when you say I am this, you have to leave room to say, well, I'm also this, or I'm also thinking about this, or I'm not sure about this, right? Whatever those subject matters are. But one of the things that I took a stance on was the whole, the idea that Black Lives Matter, and what that means, and what white privilege has been, and how our country has been, kind of orchestrated for a long time. And there are a lot of people who just don't want to hear it. And I respect that. But I don't want to ignore it. So, I choose to pay attention to those things. So, Dieter, it's been in the works for 3 years. Yeah, you're 2 million words. That's not a fan fiction. That is not a fan fiction. That's its whole last series. ADHD is also my issue. However, I was able to get it done. So, Dieter, step on it, homie. It's hard, though. I get it. But yeah, open and honest is good. It also requires me to ask for forgiveness a whole lot, right? Because usually the times when I'm honest and I don't want to be honest is when I'm admitting that I fucked up, or I'm dragging ass, or I've made mistakes. And one of the things that is very much Adrian, that is very much me, is the idea that mistakes don't make us unforgivable. And that is an opinion that I have had about myself since childhood, where it felt like, and we can go into the psychology of this, but my mom was really tough to be around for a very long time for many reasons. But one of the things that I kind of grew up in was the idea that mistakes made me worth less. And it took me a very, very long time and a lot of therapy to get to the point where it's the people who love me still love me even after I've fucked up, right? Because I'm still worthy of love even though I fucked up, right? And that is a huge part of Adrian's learning process, where he believes that he's unforgivable, right? And being taught that he is forgivable, and that he can make mistakes, and then he can grow from them is something that I've tried to internalize myself. So writing about it helped me get there as a person. Stay away from politics. I wish politics would stay away from me. Unfortunately, here we are. Open and honest is hard, but also I would argue that living behind masks, and I don't want to say lies, but deceit, is probably harder. I feel like that eats away at you more than being open and honest. But I mean, there are some people where being open and honest is just like incredibly painful. So, you know, your mileage may vary. Gen X, no shit. The comic book LLC that I started with my buddy Jason Casey, we called Latchkey Kids or Latchkey Comics because we're both Gen X guys. And how absentee our parents were is shocking. Like, shocking how little my parents actually gave a shit. And his as well. And the amount of time that we spent completely unsupervised is just absolutely mind-bending right now. And trying to reconcile that as a parent at this point in my life is hilarious because it's like my parents did not know where I was half the time, if not more. Like, didn't know, like, just didn't know. And how okay that was back in the 80s and 90s is just like, I don't even know how. Like, if my kid is in the house and I'm not sure what room she is, I have to have a second room. Like, is she safe? Is everything okay? And I tell my parents, like, I'm going to go for a walk in the woods. And I was like 12, and they'd be like, all right. And I'd literally go off walking in the fucking woods with like a stick. And I'd be gone for like 6 hours, and I'd wander in at like 9 o'clock at night, dark, not wearing enough fucking clothes, hungry, didn't bring water. And my parents would be like, supper's on the table. Like, it was no big deal. Like, I could have died. Like, there are bears in these woods, and you guys are like, eat your green beans, French cut, by the way. And like, there was just nothing, you know, no big deal. And now, like, if my kid goes in the backyard and I don't know where she is for 20 minutes, it's like a problem. But, you know, and then to like let them have that freedom without helicoptering over them, I don't know, stuff. But yeah, my parents were just, oof. Yeah. We didn't have streetlights most of the time. I don't think my parents gave a shit, to be honest. I really don't. I think my dad grew up in the Depression, and he just had different settings. Granted, as well, I am the 11th of 11 kids. My father had, in his first marriage, he had 10 with his first wife before she passed away. And I was, when he remarried, I was my mother's only child. So I'm the 11th of 11 for him. So by the time I rolled around, he was fucking done. My dad did not give a fuck what I did, because he's like, well, if this one dies, I still got 10, right? So Chris, yeah, go do whatever you want. And he was just tired. You know, I think I was born when he was 52. So, you know, he was just tired. So he just kind of let me be. And like, we didn't have that many rules in the house. It was like, don't eat your dad's food out of the fridge. Don't wake your dad up if he's sleeping. And if you get into a fight, have a good reason for it. Basically, those were like the 3 house rules. And yeah, I mean, it worked out. It turned out okay. But I kind of wish I'd had a little bit more oversight. I did not say French cut. No, I did. I think I said. Yeah, 10 coming home at midnight. Exactly. Like, and it was like no big deal. No big deal. It was even worse when I was in high school, because I would tell my parents, like, all right, I'm going to go over to my buddy's house Friday night after school. I'm going to pack a couple changes of clothes, and I'll need you to pick me up Sunday at dinner time. And most of the time I was actually over my friend's house for the whole weekend, but there were times where it was like, you know, we would go 5 towns over to a party for the entire weekend and weren't anywhere near where we said we were, and didn't tell anybody where we were going. And we could have been fucking trafficked in Africa for sex slaves, and not one person would have been able to fucking find us. So, yeah, I don't know. You get lost in a Florida swamp for 7 weeks. 7 weeks? What the hell did you do for 7 weeks in a swamp? What were you eating? Maybe I don't want to know. 7 weeks in a swamp? Yeah, I would have thought like after 7 days you would have been like, I should find my way out of here. Or I should sit still so other people can find me. But, you know, everybody's got different goals. But yeah, Gen X, it's a thing. Hopefully, if I ever get to publish any of these comics that I've got working in the background, I'll be able to publish them under the Latchkey Comics banner. But I co-own that LLC with my buddy Jason, and I don't know. We've had some discussion about like if we ever do comic projects not together, do we want to release them under that banner? And he said that he would be fine with it, but I don't know if that'll actually be the play if I ever do get to the point where I'm putting stuff out. So we'll see. Loved the 80s. I don't remember a whole lot of it. I remember the second half pretty good. And then I remember like highlights of the first half of the 80s. Like I remember Christmas gifts. And I remember holidays a lot. I remember the Celtics winning the World Champions. The NBA championship. I remember that because they had that run eating fish and gator tail. Like right off the gator's ass. Anyway, I remember that because they strung together a few titles in a row there. And I remember talking to my dad, like, is it important that they've won 2 in a row? And my dad explaining to me how cool it was. But yeah, the second half of the 80s, I remember pretty vividly. Late night infomercials, B-grade science fiction movies on USA, the USA Network, American Gladiator. Good times. Paul. Great music, great cartoons, great toys. When I think about the cartoons of that era, there were so many cartoons that were like absolutely pivotally important, right? Like I remember the Hanna-Barbera stuff, right? Like I loved those. But when I think about all of like and I hate to say this because it's a shitty admission, but like the product tie-in cartoons were fucking awesome, right? Like Sectars, Robotech, GoBots, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Rainbow Bright, Strawberry Shortcake. Like, man. Silverhawks. So good. Yeah, 2000's not that good. 2010's not that good. There's a lot of good ones now, though. Like watching the stuff with my kids. There's a lot of really good ones now. But it's just different. Like maybe the cartoons felt cooler because you could get the toys for them better now. Because I feel like when you go into the toy aisle, it's not the same, like feels like there's like the Barbie aisle and there's like the Bluey aisle and there's like the generic dolls and stuff. And then, like the boy, quote unquote, boy aisles are all like a little bit of Star Wars, a little bit of Marvel and DC. And then there's like Jurassic Park stuff. I don't know, but I feel like the cartoons were really cool because you could like watch Megatron get his ass whooped and then go into your local department store and buy Optimus Prime and Megatron and actually act out that cartoon, right? So for like a 10-year-old boy, like, holy shit, was that cool. He-Man, totally. She-Ra, the Smurfs, the Toys That Made Us is really good. Thundercats, oh my god, Thundercats was so good. Lion-O, like a motherfucker. So many good ones. So many good cartoons. Even the shitty, like Marvel ones were good back then. They were just cool. And I mean, a lot of that is like looking at it through a rose-colored glass, because a lot of them, in retrospect, would probably be garbage to watch. But like, man, it'd be nice to hang out by a fire pit. Absolutely. One of the things that I would much rather prefer in life, right? I did have a huge box of Transformers too, and they're worth a fortune. The original ones, holy shit. But Dieter, one of the things that I much prefer when I do like appearances or events is there's like these like signing and reading events where you're like, let's say at a library or at a bookstore, and there's like a podium and people show up, they sit in their chairs and you read and you take questions and you sign some books at the end or whatever. And then, everybody goes home. And those are neat and those are cool. And I like doing those. But like my preference, like if I could just do that if I could do whatever I wanted, what I would want to do is like go to a bar or a coffee shop or like a fire pit with like a dozen people, right? Like 20 at the most. And then we could all just like sit around and shoot the shit for hours and not worry about like etiquette or sitting in chairs or raising hands. Like we could just like be ourselves and just bullshit and just have conversations and stuff like that. Cause like that is my love language. And that's like the connection that I want with people. Like I don't want to just show up and sign books for the sake of, showing up and signing books, right? Like I want to like actually interact with people in a meaningful way. And like when I go places, I really try to make that happen. When I went down to Atlanta for the Walker Stalker Con back in like 2015, 2014, something like that. Every night after the show, I would like try and connect with people who had made the trip to meet me and be like, hey, I know you're in town for the show. I'm going to go here for dinner tonight. Why don't you guys come there and we'll shoot the shit? And I was able to, I think, every night but one, orchestrate some kind of like after convention, little get together with at least, a few people. And those are the memories I remember from that show rather than, sitting in a booth and shooting the shit with people. And I met a lot of really cool people, a lot of famous people at that show, and had some great memories of the show. But like the stuff that really sticks with me is like going to the fish restaurant and sitting on the second floor balcony with like 7 fans who I'd never met before and like having an awesome dinner and like just bullshitting with them and hearing their stories and having them ask me questions and just like it being like really chill. That sticks with me. So G.I. Joe battles. The amount of times I had someone hump the Baroness during like my prepubescent years is shockingly embarrassing. Not that that was the only thing I was doing with my G.I. Joes, but it happened. Exactly, Anthony. Hop Dotties until you ate the El Diablo. Yeah, the El Diablo was a bad choice for you. Let's just be honest. Hop Dotties was awesome. Which at Shooters was cool too. That was a great night. That was like, how many people were at Shooters with us that night? 4, 6? And that was awesome. That was so much fun. And like, that's the stuff that I crave. Like I would rather sit with like 6 people and like really have a good time than like stand in front of 30 and like not get to meet anybody. Like, is it cool to read people and shake hands and sign books? Yeah, absolutely. But like, it's really cool to connect with like, half a dozen people. It's different. It's just different. But we'll see what the future brings. If we just got done watching this documentary, I think it was on Hulu, called The Catfishing of Tegan and Sarah. And if you don't know who Tegan and Sarah is, they're a set of twins. Spoiler alert, their names are Tegan and Sarah. And they were, LGBT front runner, singer songwriter kind of band. And my wife listened to a lot of them back in her adolescence. But the documentary was about how they had some like crazy fans who were catfishing their other fans by pretending to be them. And one of the observations that one of the sisters was talking about is she was saying that like, look, at some point when you have like a public persona or you start to develop, fans, there's a point where you become too big to interact with people because there are just too many people to interact with. And that is also, like the Venn diagram of those two things. When that many people become your fan, the Venn diagram of now I'm making a shit ton of money, they start to overlap, right? So like every professional creator wants the I want to make a shit ton of money circle, but they also want to be able to like interact with people at the same time. And what they were saying was that like you just can't, like you have to take a step back. You can't talk to people all the time because there are too many crazies and they get inside your head, or you start to get stalkers or whatever. And I never want to get that big. Like, I always want to be able to like interact. It's important. I did pick up a car in Paramus. I would come to sign books there. Absolutely. If you know any bookstores down in that area that want to have me come in, or you want to tell them to have me come in, let them know. Just have them reach out to me. If they give me a space, I'm happy to come down and host an event. It's only about a 4-hour drive from where I'm at right now, so that's not that big a deal. We bought a new Tesla down in Jersey because Tesla isn't set up to deliver cars in most of New England for some reason. And you have to drive down to Jersey to pick it up, which is a huge logistical pain in the ass. And my wife and I did it last week. But with the Tesla, right, like driving down there would only cost us a little bit in electricity, which is kind of cool. And it's definitely within a charge. So we could drive down, plug it in at a supercharger, and basically pay like $4 in electricity to make the trip, which is pretty sweet. I think it'd be more like $14, but that's way less than how much gas it would cost us in our other car. Probably like $70 in gas. To be honest, I know you say like come to Jersey, have a good time, whatever, but your fucking roads are awful. New Jersey has some of the shittiest layouts I have ever seen. Like the Garden State Parkway is one of the most heinously designed highway systems in the known world. And I've driven some pretty shitty roads, but like the way that highway twists and turns, and like you're driving and then all of a sudden there's traffic on both sides of you going in the other direction. And you're like, I don't even know how there's a highway now on both sides of me and I'm in the middle and they're going this way and I'm going this way. Like, I don't even know how that happened. And then they're like, take a left. And you're like, there's a fucking highway there. Like, I can't take a left through the highway. How do I even do that? But everybody I've met from Jersey has been cool. So I'll make the trip. I'll bitch about the roads because I bitch about the roads. But there's no place to do signings in Montana. It is very upsetting. You mean like comic stores, Anthony, or like street corners? Paul's son, Jack, says hi. Hi, Jack. You do have shit roads. See? I'm not making it up. Boston's bad, but not like the Garden State Parkway. Boston's just congested and it's lots of one-way streets, but the Parkway is like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, what? And like when we were in Paramus, we get off on this road and it's basically a slip road like they have in the Midwest. And we're like driving along and it's like, okay, in order to get to this side of the road, you have to go this way and then loop around and then go over an overpass and then take the exit to get on the road that brings you back in the other direction. But halfway down that exit, you take a left instead of getting on the road, and that puts you in the parking lot to the business next to the business you're trying to get to. So then you have to cut through that parking lot to get to the front. It's like, dude, like what? Intersections, left and right, like a 4-way intersection solves all of those problems. But instead, Jersey has decided to solve all those traffic issues with like 4-leaf clovers in every direction and parking lots that look like they were designed by fucking MC Escher. No comic book stores, and they're not accommodating. That's shitty. That's really shitty. What city are you near? I forget. It's got to be big enough to actually have some shit to get there together. Yeah, nobody. The Jersey Shore. Not a lot of comic stores. Yeah, I mean, traffic circles, Wendy. I mean, those aren't any better. Most people can't operate a traffic circle to save their life, sometimes quite literally. We have a lot of rotaries and traffic circles up here in New England, and most of the time people do okay with them. But then you got people who aren't familiar with them and they just do weird shit, and it causes accidents for everybody. It's like, you've entered the social contract to learn how to use a rotary. Learn how to use the rotary. Don't just like blast through it like it's the Daytona 500. Understanding that when you turn, there's, you turn at the correct point. Don't get in the wrong lane and then dive over at the last second. Yeah, whatever. I could bitch about driving all day. Helena. The only comic book store they have is shut down. All right, Google. Helena, Montana. The Wikipedia picture is very pretty. Plane ticket, 314 from Boston. It's not too bad. Population 35,000. So that's about the size of Concord here. Concord, which is the capital of New Hampshire, I think has 4 comic book shops. Do you think people in Montana just can't read? That's so sad. Look at the map here. What's kind of cool about this is the chat I can bring up in a second window. So I'm like looking at another page and I can actually still see the chat. Northwest Ohio. Nice. Near Indiana, right? Is that what's right there? Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. There would be a lot of zombies. Okay, where's Helena? Looking at a map. There's nothing near there. There's nothing near there. Oh, wow. It's like really in the middle of nowhere. So you're like kind of in the lap of Idaho. Wow. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you. Looks like Bozeman and Billings are quite a ways away. All right, so Anthony, what you need to do is apply for a government loan to open a comic book store. And there you go. Laura, do you have a lot of world building notes? My lord, do I have a lot of world building notes. One of my previous incarnations before I got into professional writing was as a game developer. And my job was initially it was like rule testing and like cycling through iterations of games to find the best mixtures of rules. But eventually I kind of walked into continuity and world building stuff. And I helped design entire, game worlds with characters and settings and maps and all that jazz. And as an old school gamer, world building is like the whole point of role-playing games, right? You build a world and then you inhabit it with characters. So when I'm writing a series, I create extensive Bibles, essentially, of information about like location and plot and background and politics and blah, 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 blah. So yes, I have a ton of world building notes. The biggest example I give is my Elmoran series, the dark fantasy that I wrote, trilogy 12 years ago now. That started out as a role-playing game setting years and years and years before that never got published. And I wrote the novels set in the game world I designed. And the novels themselves are like, I think the first one's like 90,000 words. The second one's like 80,000 words. And the third one's like 120,000 words, 130,000. It's a big book. So all told, that's like a little over 300,000 words. In addition to those novels, I have another 300,000 to 500,000 words of setting development that's never seen the light of day. Just to give you an example. So yes, I have a shit ton, lots of spreadsheets. The maps are tough to read on the Kindle. I agree. Easy to read in the print though. So there's that. New Jersey does have a ton of comic book stores. Fort FB page. What's the Fort FB page? I assume that's a New Jersey thing. DMW credit score is 4. Yes, 4. I'm under the impression you don't need good credit to get a lot of the government loans, though. You just need to like prove that you have a building or a business, and if you have a business, you're just automatically entitled to a set amount of federal funding, I guess. You can also, again, Anthony, I'm just saying, like, you could sell feet pictures on OnlyFans, right? Like, come on, dude. Like, how much do you really want a comic book store? Oh, RR. Yeah, he's a good dude. He interviewed me a long time ago. Let me talked a little bit. He's pretty busy, very successful. I am very happy for his success. For the record, Anthony, I'm not saying you have good-looking feet, but I think that there are a lot of people who are turned on by ugly feet. So, there's always hope, even for guys like us. All right. Well, it's closing in on 11. I need to make coffee for the morning and see if the kids need their lunches made. Do I find modern RPGs too complicated and way too action-based? Great question. I don't find 5e to be too complicated. I think it's actually an enormous simplification of earlier versions of Dungeons and Dragons. It is very action-based. Calling it a role-playing game feels like a stretch sometimes because like characters are primarily just combat engines, right? Like there aren't any really good mechanics for social stuff. So that's kind of frustrating. But D&D is not the only game out there. Most people who think of role-playing games just think of D&D. Have a good night, Anthony. Love you too, buddy. Like just looking at the shelf I have next to me, for non-D&D games, I have Blades in the Dark, Witchcraft, The Bleakness, Mothership, a whole slew of the White Wolf games from the Storyteller system, first and second, some third edition. Nobilis, which is a diceless role-playing game. A bunch of 3E kind of supplemental games. I have Call of Cthulhu. I have Delta Green. The Hellboy role-playing game. There's GURPS over there. So I've played a lot. And I also have Forbidden Lands over there. All Flesh Must Be Eaten. Gods. Crystal Punk. What else is over there? Vaesen, the Aliens game, Simbaroom. Anyway, most of them are much better role-playing games because they have way more social mechanics built in. So I really like those. I'm happy to answer questions, Wendy. Dieter, so I've answered this question 1,000 times. I'll answer it for you again because you deserve it. James departed the series abruptly without warning. Pretty much on the day an audiobook was due to me for proofing purposes, and he had not recorded anything. And I messaged him and was like, hey, dude, where's the book? Just haven't heard back from you. Yep, Shadowrun was awesome. And James gave me some like kind of half-assed excuse why he hadn't recorded it. And I was like, like, wait, what? Why? Like, you didn't reach out to me? And he kind of said it was my fault. And I don't believe it was. And even if it was my fault, the thing that he was complaining about could have been solved with either an email or a phone call, and he did neither. And in previous years, he would have always called or emailed. Like we had a very, very friendly working relationship, and we're very we were friends, I would say. And the fact that he just dodged all responsibility and didn't do any of the work and then didn't communicate anything to me and then pretended like it was okay. I was, not happy with him, and I let him know it. And was like, this is weird. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good. And I don't like it. And, I don't understand what's going on here. And he never talked to me again. Never responded to another email, never responded to another phone call. When I tried to talk to him through other people who were mutual acquaintances, he wouldn't respond to their messages regarding anything about me. He would talk to them about anything else, but he would not respond to anything that had anything to do with me or AUD. And to this day, I have not exchanged a single message with him. He sent me one angry message last year about contractual stuff that he was being removed from, which is, fair to get frustrated about it. But after fucking me over, I really don't feel like doing anybody favors, I don't believe in being spiteful, but I also don't believe in being taken advantage of. So he literally ghosted me on the due date for an audiobook. And at that point, it was like, I got to find somebody. And we went through an extensive casting process where I had over 100 auditions for the voice of Adrian. And I went through that 100 and picked out, I think it was the top 16 that I liked. And then I formed a focus group on Facebook where I invited 20 or 30 of like long time listeners, people who had been fans for a very, very long time. And I were vocal and were supportive and had opinions that I valued. And I had them join the group, or I asked them to join the group. And I said, hey, I'm going to give you the interviews, the auditions rather, of the 16. And I need you to listen to as many as you can this week. And I need you to vote for your top 4, basically. And after 7 days, 20 people or so had responded, and I correlated who had the top 8 votes. And I narrowed it from 16 to 8, and I had them all do a second audition with a different script to kind of test their range. And the second round of auditions went out of 8, and then I said, all right, pick your top 2. And it was like the same 3 guys were all the top 2. One of those 3 were either 1 or 2. And in the end, I forget the names of the other 2 fellas, but DJ Leon was the guy who had, I would say, about 60% of the number 1 votes based on his auditions. And it was also clear when I was doing the auditions that when I was communicating with DJ that he like got it. He was like with it and listened and took the feedback and was easy to work with. And it was pretty obvious that he was going to be the guy. So Dieter, I don't think he was being lazy. I think he was having a lot of personal stuff go on, without giving away too much of his private business. I was also friends with his wife and some of his kids who were, teenagers at the time. And he was not being a good partner, a good spouse. And ultimately, his marriage ended in divorce. He moved out of state. He married another person and had a baby with them, like all within the span of a year. And it was, it sounded like a midlife crisis. And, I don't want to shit on him too much, but it was a really tough situation for me. And he put me in a bad spot and then didn't take responsibility for it. So, is what it is. Paul, could you pitch an AUD series to Prime or Netflix? It has been done. At the beginning of the live, the question was asked, and without going into it for half an hour, AUD has been in development in Hollywood off and on for about 5 years now. And in 2023, summer 2023, we were like a lockdown. We're like an inch away from the green light for the series order, and it fell through. Because the Discovery HBO merger happened, and we were involved with the studios that make shows for the 2 of them, and they stopped greenlighting shows, and it fell through. And in the time that that happened to when they were starting to greenlight shows again, everybody who was attached to AUD as a show had to like find other work. They couldn't sit there waiting, which is totally understandable, and that fell through. But we were looking at a TV show produced by Warner Brothers Television, which is basically who makes TV for HBO Max. And we probably would have had an HBO series, but it didn't happen, and it fell through, and almost does not count. But since then, we've had some film inquiry for movies. We haven't had a TV show inquiry, but there's nothing concrete added up. The guy who was my showrunner and executive producer had a development deal with Netflix. And if the Warner Brothers deal fell through, he was going to go to Netflix. But Netflix said, yeah, we're not really interested in any kind of zombie property right now. So, it's not just whether or not we think it would be good. It would be what they think would be good in terms of a financial investment, because it's really expensive to make TV shows. especially ones that have special effects budgets. We were fishing for a pilot order. Like, just give us the money to make one long episode so you can see what we've got. And my showrunner was looking for 6 million for the pilot. Would have been happy to get 5 and could have made it happen with 4 million for one episode. So when you do that math and you realize, like, okay, you know, if we get a 6-episode season order or a 10-episode season order, and it's even 3 million an episode, which is lower than what he wanted, that's still a $30 million investment. So we'll see. And thank you. DJ did turn out to be a good choice. He, you know, obviously doesn't do things like James does, and he has his own style and quibbles and stuff like that. But he's a good guy, and he's going to see it through to the end. Horseshoes and hand grenades. Yeah, Apocalypse Z was recently turned into a movie. So, I mean, there's always maybe. And I still have the guy who was the showrunner, who worked really, really hard to get it made, is still a fan of the series and still has tons of connections, and still brings it up in meetings with people. And, you know, he is a successful writer as well and gets hired on a lot of like per episode basis. So, you know, he'll get hired to write an episode or 2 of a series, or he'll get, you know, brought into executive produce stuff. And in between those jobs, you know, when people are, you know, they ask him like, hey, what do you want to do? You know, what are you interested in making? He brings up AUD, and, you know, nobody's bitten yet. And there's another film executive out in Hollywood that's been a huge fan for a really, really long time. And he's been a part of almost every conversation that's come up in some way, either like connecting people or, you know, answering questions or whatnot. And he's fairly influential. And he constantly brings it up. And he's the guy who like is always bringing people into the circle of it. So as long as those 2 people are out there interested in trying to make it happen, you know, I'm in the game. So we'll see what happens. It'd be great if it happened. If it doesn't, you know, okay. The other thing that kind of, I don't want to say complicates things, but Keith Blackmore's Mountain Man series is getting produced. Joe Manganiello of True Blood fame and D&D fame, actually, is developing that show or that series into a show or a movie. I'm not sure what they're doing. And my stuff is constantly compared to Mountain Man, which is fine because it's a good series. But the fact that that is moving forward makes it tough because, you know, kickstart a video game. No, that sounds like a ton of work and would be obscenely expensive, and I have no idea how to do it. The movie was given a green light. Yeah, I forget where it was, so we'll see. And I believe Joe is going to play. Was it Gus? I forget the name of the character. Which is great because Joe's a cool dude and will do a great job. And interestingly enough, Joe was one of the actors that we were talking about for Adrian, because my former executive producer worked with him on True Blood, and they had a relationship. And he was one of the people that was going to be kind of brought in to read for the role. So I don't know. It's possible that Joe read for AUD or was talked to by my guy and then wound up reading more of the genre and then fell in love with Mountain Man. I don't know. That makes some sense, but I have no idea if that actually happened. So, but yeah, it would be great to get a show. It would be great to get any kind of show, animated, anime style, short form, long form, anything would be really cool. Any kind of a financial windfall from a show coming in would be fantastic, right? And sometimes it's a lot of money and sometimes it's not. It depends on, the budget of the show and what they think they can do with it and how good a contract you negotiate for. There's a lot of variables, but the big thing is like it would bring a lot of new readers in, a lot of new listeners in. And as a writer, that's really what I hope for, right? Like if, 500,000 people watch the episode of it and even 1% of those people try out a book, that would be huge. Message Keith on a regular basis. Good. Tell him I said hi. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with him. I think I'm friends with him on Facebook, but I don't think I've ever actually talked to him. So anyway, so that's the television update again. Hopefully one day soon I'll have better news, or at least more interesting news to share with people. What's funny though is the whole time we were in development, I couldn't really talk about it, partially because there were like multiple studios kind of circling it and we were like jockeying for position. And a lot of times when, an author says, hey, blah, blah has been optioned for something, bullshit has been going on for like a year to get to the point where you can announce something. And the studios keep everything really close to their chest because they don't want it to be too interesting before they can buy it. Because if they're negotiating like, hey, we think we want to make it, let's talk to the author, let's see what their ideas are, and before the money gets exchanged, right? And then if other people hear that they're interested in making it, then other studios will be like, hey, should we want to make that too? And then they swoop in, and it could potentially drive the cost of them making something up, which is good for me, right? Because if two studios get into an argument over how much they want to show, the end result is I get paid more, right? But that also pushes them away, because if they come in and the bidding goes too high, they could all walk and then I get nothing. It's just this weird dance that, having dealt with this in Hollywood for several years now, I just don't get it entirely. It's just really weird and complicated. And in publishing, the saying is that you hear 1,000 no's and then finally you get one yes and you're published, right? Hollywood is the exact opposite. Hollywood, you hear 1,000 yeses and everybody wants to do it and everybody wants to do it. And then you get one no from the people who have the money, and that's it. Nothing happens. So it's definitely a weird change of pace when you're like used to one and then all of a sudden it's the other, because you talk to all these people who are like powerful and rich and famous and whatnot, and they're like jazzed and they're saying all the right things, and like, all right, we just need this one person to jump on board. And you talk to that one person and they're like, yeah, I don't think so. And then everybody folds like a house of cards. Wait, you guys were so excited last week. Like, okay, this guy said no. Can we talk to anybody else? Like, is there literally anyone else that is similar to this person? And then it gets really weird and whatever. But it could happen. We were in the game once. The series has not gotten any smaller. AUD is bigger now than it's ever been. So the likelihood of us getting a show has not gotten worse. And if we got really close before, we could get really close again. So, and on that, I'm going to say thank you and hit the bed. I'm tired. I have a lot to do tomorrow. But I really appreciate y'all for coming out. And if you stuck around this long, thank you. Please feel free to watch this again. I'm going to post it. It'll be available. And thanks for supporting the book on release day. So appreciate it.